One of the biggest games of the college football season. The Michigan Wolverines travel to Columbus, where Ohio State is currently about a 3-touchdown favorite. The total around 43. This game's Saturday, noon Eastern time on Fox. Michigan has won 3 straight against Ohio State. Its longest win streak against the Buckeyes since 1995 through 1997. They also won 3 straight back then. They have not had a 4-game win streak since 91. So it's been a really long time since they've had a win streak like this against the Buckeyes. I'll tell you this, the guy in college football that is feeling more pressure than anybody going into this weekend is Ryan Day. He has been exceptional against everyone. Everyone he's played, he's been exceptional. Since taking over as the head coach in 2019, he is 1-3 against the Wolverines. And then basically he's beaten just about everybody else. 47-1 against all other opponents. The lone loss came this year against Oregon on the road. So against all of Big Ten opponents. So in case you were curious what I was talking about there, Oregon did beat them a couple of years ago, and we know they've lost in the playoffs. But against Big Ten opponents, Ryan Day has dominated. What will it come down to? There's a bunch, but it's still Ohio State, Michigan. It's still going to be a line of scrimmage game, which is why we ask question number 1. Is Michigan's power run game back? Now, there was a point last week against Northwestern where things did not look very good for Michigan as far as running the football. Yes, they had a nice, comfortable lead. They were up at the time by double digits, but they had just 14 rushing yards on 12 carries. They still really couldn't find any movement on the interior of their offensive line. And the challenges and the inconsistencies we've seen from that group have really started from the beginning, first game of the year, all the way through week 11. This group has been really untrustworthy. They've been the main culprit. They're not the only reason, though, why the run game hasn't consistently been able to go. Khalil Mullings, after October 1st, has kind of come back to earth a little bit. You look at what he did in the first 5 games, he was off the charts. Thought he was en route to a possible All-American type of season. Well, since that time, the last 6 or 7 weeks, it's all come crashing back. Donovan Edwards, he hasn't really been as advertised all season long. Yes, coming into the year, we all had high hopes, but we've kind of now acknowledged maybe he's not the lead back after all. Now, for a Michigan team that has been years in the making that led to last year, where it was all about a very clear and established identity. That was a dominant, physical, unrelenting commitment to the run game that you would not deviate from under any circumstance. And you think back to last year, I mean, this is a team that has erased deficits by running it 42 consecutive times. So we've known all along what Michigan is. The question is, could they be that this year? And because of injuries, because of inexperience, because of a complete lack of a passing game, teams have been able to really sell out against Michigan's rushing attack. And there have been times when there have been holes open, and these relatively inexperienced running backs haven't always been able to find the soft spot. But there in the second half against Northwestern, we started to see the light flicker on just a little bit. Now, is it too little too late? We'll find out. Maybe it carries over, but Northwestern, they're not an atrocious run defense. People will point to, well, it's Northwestern. Come on, man. Against the run, they're not bad. So for the Wolverines to go out and rush for about $190 and over 8 yards a carry and 4 touchdowns in the second half, I feel pretty good about that type of performance. But let's acknowledge it is a massive step up in competition this week when they take on the Buckeyes. Buckeyes are 3rd right now in rushing defense, and they're 3rd in yards per carry given up at 2.7 yards per carry. So massive step up in competition. But the second half last week, if they could bottle that up and recreate that performance, it had me feeling a lot better about their ability to potentially make this thing interesting. Question number 2, can Michigan's passing game give them anything? Now, in order for Michigan to win this game, Davis Warren's going to have the game of his life. Okay, that's not that uncommon, by the way. To pull off tremendous upsets, oftentimes the quarterback's going to have to play out of his mind. The quarterback is the ultimate eraser position. But Davis Warren also can't do it by himself. And we know the go-to guy is Colston Loveland. at tight end. But he got banged up last week, didn't return to the field. At halftime, we're not sure. He had 3 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown there. I'm assuming all is good to go. I'm guessing he's good to go. But in the event in which he's a late scratch, that will only make things more difficult for the Michigan Wolverines. Even if Loughlin does go and is at 100%, it's a really difficult matchup. Because when you look at what Ohio State has in the secondary, they have Lathan Ransom, who's been outstanding at safety all season long, and they have Caleb Downs, who pound for pound is as good as anybody in college football, regardless of position. Ironically, I think a big reason why Ohio State pursued Caleb Downs so aggressively in the portal is because of this game and because of this matchup. They wanted a physical safety that can cover. Caleb Downs not only checks those 2 boxes, but he checks about 15 other boxes as well. But I think a big reason why Ohio State made him such a huge priority in recruiting last year is for this game specifically and the matchup that he might have against Colston Loveland. We know that the most productive tight end in America is Tyler Warren. And against Ohio State, that's Penn State's tight end, by the way, in case you guys haven't been watching the Nittany Lions. Against Ohio State, he had 4 catches for 47 yards, but they got a little creative in using him as a wildcat quarterback. He ended up having 47 yards on the ground, including a 33-yard carry that was his biggest play of the game. We also know that the wide receivers for Michigan, in Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan, assuming he can come back, missed last week, they're going to have to create big plays downfield. And so far this year, Michigan has attempted just 6 passes that have traveled 30-plus yards. That's the fewest in the FBS. So I don't love their matchup on the perimeter against this Ohio State defense. A couple things, though, that would concern me if I were Ohio State. I think Davis Igbinosun's a really energetic player. I think he plays with a lot of passion, but I do think his technique from time to time leaves a little something to be desired. The guy is a walking penalty. How many penalties against Indiana last week? I think it was 3 or 4. So he does a really good job of being physical, but if the passing attack isn't going, maybe the best way that they can move it through the air is by way of defensive penalty. Davis Igbinosun needs to be smart in this game. And then Denzel Burke, yes, he's given up some shot plays this year. He's given up 5 20-plus yard completions in the last 5 games, including 2 against Oregon. So will they challenge him? Maybe, but I don't know if Michigan has the guy to be able to really threaten Denzel Burke over the top. So I think he'll probably play a little safe and keep it in front of him. I also think one more thing as far as the passing game for Michigan, they're going to pull out every trick in the book. Why wouldn't they? Okay, running back passes, double passes, screen and goes, pumps, and then most notably flea flickers. And we have seen big plays on misdirection, trick plays affect Ohio State in the past. They cannot fall victim to those in this matchup because that might be the only way Michigan can sustain any type of offensive attack. Question 3, Ohio State's offensive line at times this year has been vulnerable. Will it be against one of the best defensive lines in the country? Ohio State's problems this year have mostly been on the left side of the offensive line. We know that Josh Simmons got banged up, missed time after the 6th game of the year, but now they have lost Seth McLaughlin right there at center. And the interior against this group in Michigan might be the area that would concern me a little bit more. Now, they couldn't really manufacture a lot of push in the run game last week against Indiana. Was that because of a new look offensive line, their 5th different offensive line combination? Or was that just because Indiana's pretty stout on the interior? I don't really know the answer to that. All I know is that they're going to need to run the ball a little better against Michigan than they did against Indiana. I also know that Michigan's defensive line might be the best group that they have to be able to neutralize this game. They have the best tandem at defensive tackle in the country. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, they can create tons of problems up the middle of the offensive line. And if you pay too much attention to the interior, guess who's going to get some one-on-ones on the outside? And I think this group on the edges has been painfully underrated by the way of the national media. Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore are awesome. Josiah Stewart's got 8.5 sacks. He leads the team. Question number 4, can Michigan cover Ohio State's wide receivers and limit the passing game. Now, Will Howard will start there because for much of the season, there was this notion that Will Howard is just some system quarterback and that is limited and he just doesn't need to screw it up and needs to just be a distributor. I think he has kind of bucked that trend because if you look at how Will Howard really played this year, he's been outstanding. He's been all you could possibly want and some when you brought him up to become your starter from Kansas State. Now, if there's one area where I'd like for him to be a little bit better is maybe on the downfield throws, but he's been super efficient this year. Really efficient. And on Saturday against Indiana, in one of the biggest spots of the year, 22 of 26, 201, couple touchdowns, rushing touchdown. He had a drop that led to an interception. I really like how Will Howard's playing, and I just don't think he's getting enough credit. We know how good these wide receivers are. They're amazing. I don't need to walk you through the pecking order. Jeremiah Smith's amazing. Emeka Egbuka is unstoppable. I think Carnell Tate's probably the unsung hero of the bunch because he doesn't get the love that he probably deserves. But when teams double cover J.J. Smith, guess who's been stepping up time and time again? That's been Carnell Tate, who I think is a guy that is very important to this team down the stretch in the event in which they continue to double. Having a guy that can win your one-on-ones is massive. When you look at Michigan's defensive backs, Will Johnson, he's missed 4 games in a row. I don't know if he can go. We'll see if he can. But if he can't go, they're pretty gettable on the outside. Whether it's Zeke Berry, Emil Hall, Jair Hill, all have had some difficult moments at times this year in coverage. And one other thing of note, Jair Hill didn't really play until the fourth quarter last week, and he was wearing a different number. They said that they were dealing with something internally. So I don't know what that means, but I do know this. Whoever's out there in coverage better be at their best for Michigan because this Buckeye team and this passing attack doesn't take a backseat to very many teams. Trend in the game, Buckeyes are currently favored right now by about 21 points. That's tied for the second largest spread in the history of this rivalry. So just something to be mindful of when you look at where Ohio State and Michigan currently are. I think Ohio State's going to roll here. I lay the points, and outside of a couple turnovers and maybe a trick play or two, I just don't see how Michigan is going to be able to consistently move the football. I don't think it's a good matchup for them at all. I think Ohio State has had this one circled for 365 days. I think they roll against the Wolverines on Saturday morning.